All right, welcome to another episode of The Fundable Founder. I'm joined today by Derek Canton, who's the founder and CEO of Paerpay. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here as well. You know, we met several years ago out at the first time we met was at an event at WPI where I think you won the crowd choice for best pitch. And I'm so happy to see your success and your growth since then. But why don't we start out? Why don't you tell us what is the elevator pitch for Paerpay? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we all know, 2020 absolutely changed everything, right? The world went contactless. And although it might be easier for you and I to use things like Apple Pay and Google Pay to go contactless, the reality is there are millions of merchants that are still struggling to adapt. So what we're doing is in this world where, groceries just show up at your door and everything now is virtual, there's still merchants that are accepting payments over the phone and giving you a piece of paper and a pen to sign for when you show up, right? And for so many reasons, they shouldn't be doing this. And this is exactly where we step in. So we're helping merchants with legacy POS systems, providing them a solution to provide a contactless option that requires no new hardware, no changing their processors. And the best part is us as individuals don't have to worry about downloading the app to get set up and start going.
And I don't have to give my credit card information over the phone anymore, right? To some random person.
Yeah, and there was a recent article that the new dining and dash is people calling in their orders and disputing charges. So merchants are now losing billions of dollars as a result of this. And so that's another thing we're actually helping solve because we're a different type of transaction. And I don't get too technical, but we're doing some cool stuff and we're helping merchants nationwide, and it's been really exciting.
That's great. Well, and anything to get our kind of local businesses back up and running, many of whom that had to shut down for a while, is great. So thank you for all the work you're doing. So why don't you just go back a few years? What's the origin story for Derek and Paerpay? Like, why did you come up with this? What really got you going on this journey?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's funny because I remember when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I would kind of do research on like other founders and their eureka moment, if you will, where they just said, I'm going to do this and they're going to get millions of dollars and solve this problem and become a billionaire, right? And then as I looked into that, I realized that's not at all how it really happens. When I first got started, I was actually working at a Dell EMC. So I had a day job. I recently graduated college and I had an e-commerce company back in college and just loved entrepreneurship. And some of the best advice that I got was you can be an entrepreneur, but you don't have to be a starving entrepreneur. Because you don't have to work harder than everybody else, but like just start learning, just start doing. Yeah. And so I'm self-taught in a lot of things. So, graphic design, product design, just talking to customers, trying to find a real problem to solve. And I went through 3 or 4 iterations before I even figured out something that might be interesting enough to solve. For me, I had the opportunity to go to a hackathon in Las Vegas called Money 2020, which is one of the world's largest fintech hackathons. And I had this idea initially around food ordering and ordering as a group, and DoorDash went on to do it. So maybe I should, knock on the door and ask for some equity, but that's a different conversation. But I realized I was trying to solve too many things all in one solution. And I said, well, if I can do one thing really, really well, what would that look like? And so for me, with my passion for having really great customer experiences and me being a tech nerd and loving payments, it was a natural intersection. And I had this thesis around, the best payment experience is one where you don't have to pay. And it was kind of a little of a joke at first, but the question was, well, how close can we get to that payment experience where it adds a lot of value? And we started that on that journey in 2016, officially started the business 2017. And really things didn't really come together until, 2020 of this past year of when COVID hit and the world shut down and they needed a contactless option. And, they say opportunity is preparation meeting timing. Yep. And so I had plenty of time to be prepared and the timing worked out where we had the perfect solution given the state of the world.
That's awesome. And you've already touched on several themes that I see in successful entrepreneurs. You're passionate, you're intellectually curious, and just have that strong work ethic. And that's come across for many years. At what point did you decide to not be a starving entrepreneur and actually go diving headfirst into just doing Paerpay?
So that's a really great question. And I would say I'd answer a couple of ways. One is I knew I wanted to at some point take that jump to go full time. And I knew that there was going to be a level of financial insecurity that would come with that. And I said, well, if I'm going to make that jump, how can I mitigate my risk as much as possible, right?
Okay.
So, when I was at Dell EMC, I decided to live with my parents, and I saved as much money as I could. And I said, okay, well, when I jump, I need to make sure I have plenty of runway and know exactly what the opportunity looks like when I'm jumping, right? So I went full-time in 2018 when I was accepted into the Mass Challenge Accelerator program. And I said, hey, look, I have about a year to just like heads down, figure this out. And I knew that I had to raise some money to be able to eventually, grow and actually be sustainable, right? And I did whatever I could to kind of keep my cost of living low. And I was living with my siblings when I eventually moved to Boston, and right. So you do those things to make sure you can survive. But at the same time, as I put myself on a timeline, I said, look, I have a year to come up with a real plan, a path to funding. If not, then, it's probably not the right timing, not the right opportunity, and I should still have my day job. And I sought a lot of guidance when I made that decision, because once you step away from your full-time job to be all in, it's a very, very different lifestyle mentality. And and if you aren't cautious of when you do that, you can get burned out pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's amazing. And not only stepping away from your daytime job, but a really good job. You were at a great company and a great job. But you did make that move. You became an entrepreneur. You went head first. You saved up that money. What was your strategy then around raising money? Did you start off by doing a small friends and family to supplement your savings? Did you try to win some money in competitions and things like that? How did you kind of get off the ground?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's a little bit of kind of all the above. We did win a couple competitions and got some dollars, but when you're talking about really scaling a business and hiring employees and even giving myself a salary, it takes real dollars, and getting a few $1,000s here and there just wouldn't have cut it. And for me, this was my first kind of entrepreneur experience in a startup where we need capital to grow, and day one, we're not going to be profitable, right? And so we need to be intentional about the money that we're burning, who is it going to go to, how we're going to spend these funds, et cetera. And candidly, when I first started, I was like, all right, this is going to happen. I'm going to have a pitch deck. I'm going to walk into a boardroom somewhere. I'm going to give this great presentation. The people will look at each other, put their heads down to write something down, slide a check across the table, and I'll have millions of dollars, right? Because that's what you see on TV. And that was not my experience. And really, there was a couple of things that really changed my perspective on fundraising at an early stage. The first thing was I had a mentor who told me, he said, look, as an entrepreneur, a lot of times we're in this perspective of, oh my gosh, I need money, right? And it's almost this sense of desperation.
Right.
You need to change that perspective and say, look, you are building something of value, and you're giving people the opportunity to be a part of that journey with you. And if they don't want to be part of it, that's totally okay, because that means they're not right for you, right? Yep. So that was the first thing that absolutely changed my perspective, because the reality was I got way more no's than I got a yes. And I said, look, every single no is going to be closer to the right yes. Because if you get the right yes from the wrong person, that alone can kill you, right?
Who was the person that gave you that advice? Because that's tremendous advice.
So the person was Bob Mason, who I think you know really well.
I know Bob.
Yeah, we had a really great conversation in Boston. He bought me lunch, and he kind of just shook me a little bit and said, look, Derek, don't go play the game of fetch a rock. And what he meant by that is a lot of times investors always want to see things to help de-risk the business. Yep. And there's never going to be enough they could see to de-risk the business. And if there was everything you'd see, then you'd be a profitable company and have millions of dollars in your bank, and you're not really an early stage startup, right?
Right.
So that was the first thing. And then the second thing that was really helpful as well too is I almost took this approach of almost it's kind of like dating. You don't just show up on a date and ask to get married, right? You don't just show up and say, okay, I'm ready for a check, right? And another thing I heard, and this was from Clem from Techstars, he said, investors invest in lines and not in points. Okay. And what he meant by that was, if you can have someone follow your trajectory, it makes investing a lot easier. And what that looks like practically was sending out monthly updates and being in communication with investors, and the good and the bad, right? And hey, there's a little bit of a curveball. We're navigating this. We're getting through this, and problem solved. Because the reality is that things will blow up. Things will be on fire. There will be challenges and curveballs, and they want an entrepreneur that's going to be able to get through those and not to be like, oh, well, things got hard, so I'm out, right?
Yep.
And I think because I was able to demonstrate that, for at least 6 months before I actually asked for money, when I asked for money, people said, hey, look, the business is still early, but this is an entrepreneur that I want to back.
Yep.
And it's worked out ever since, which has been good. And we recently just closed actually our second round of capital, which has been awesome.
That's awesome. And the advice you're giving is good advice. It's poignant. It's something we hear from a lot of successful first-time entrepreneurs is, do those monthly updates, right? Like take those potential investors on the journey with you and try to build that trust, right? Because they're investing in you as a person. They're investing in Derek and his ability to kind of grow this business, whatever trajectory that might take and whatever path that might take. And so you're building that trust, right? Because they're ultimately investing in you. Nobody, to your point, right? You can't build that trust by walking into one boardroom, giving a 30-minute pitch, and then expect somebody to slide a check over the table. And I think, it's something that a lot of first-time entrepreneurs just don't quite realize. So I'm glad you took us down that path. So let's talk about, you've been doing your monthly updates for a while. You're building your business. Did you have kind of goals in mind for I need the product to get to this point? I need this many customers. I need this team, and then I'll be ready to raise capital? Or was it just kind of winging it a little bit as you went along? How did you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how I structured it was a couple ways. One is someone told me that when you officially start fundraising, you have, like the clock starts, right? The second you tell someone, hey, our round is open, we'd love to if you want to invest, right? They're going to be like, okay, well, a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, well, what happened? And usually have roughly about 90 days to really get that round completely together and closed out. And because, because we didn't really know who we're going to get money from, I was like, well, we got to figure this out. So what I did was I said, hey, we're thinking about fundraising, what do you think? Right? Like, oh, here are some terms that we're talking to a couple of people. You want to create this demand or fear of missing out, right? So, we've been talking to a couple of investors. They've been following our journey. They're very excited about it. People have been asking about investing in the business, and we're still kind of thinking through it a little bit. What are your thoughts and your feedback? And one of the questions I would always ask is, what would you need to see to feel comfortable investing in our business?
Yep.
And that gave very, very clear milestones and like, oh, well, it's the right team, or, the product needs to be working, or you have some revenue, or you need a pilot, or, and once I started getting, yeah, exactly. Right. And once I had those proof points and those milestones, that was a stake in the sand. Right. So, oh, great. Well, I'll really will take note of that. We're not officially fundraising yet, but I'll let you know. And then after I started having those conversations, giving updates, the questions started to be asking, oh, well, we're thinking about fundraising. We already have, 3 or 4 people who express interest. If we decided to fundraise, would you be at all interested in participating, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, I'd be interested in learning more. But okay, cool. Well, we're not officially there yet. We'll see. There's still a lot of exciting things going on, but, I'll keep you posted. And once you get enough of that, like super soft circle, and what I mean by that is not someone hasn't committed a dollar amount, where they said, hey, I would love to learn more and I would love to be engaged. Once I had enough of those people, I said, look, well, if we have, 10, 15, 20 people and the check size is, it was the first round of capital. So I took check sizes as small as $5,000, right? Yep. Because I'm like, look, I just need the money in. I said, look, if we can get this between $5,000 and $50,000 checks, depending on the person, I can get an idea of how much money we had on the super soft circle. The second that we had enough people that said, hey, I'd be interested, and here are the terms that we're thinking about, the messaging was, hey, so we're going to be opening up a round, and I'm coming to you first because you're interested in participating.
Okay.
And so within the first week, we're about 50% raised because I had already built this relationship for months on end, and we've been talking to them for weeks about this idea of putting together a round together. So people were already positioned to participate. And then once people started investing, then they wanted to pull their friends in and their buddies and other people in the network. And then, next thing you know, we're oversubscribed. And it was just kind of this snowball that at first you're gonna have to really take your time and where you're kind of directing it. But once you get that right momentum, it just starts to build on itself, which is really, really helpful.
So did you effectively create your own term sheet and just did you have a lead at all? Or did you just kind of create your own term sheet and pull in 20, 30 investors and just brought it all together at once?
That's exactly what we did. We created our own terms for both of our rounds, actually. So we did safe notes on both of them and said, hey, before I just put a stake in the sense that this is the number, you kind of feel it out a little bit, right? And if you have enough people that agree to the terms, if someone else later down the road complains about it, the messaging is, hey, look, we're giving all of our investors the same terms. And if you don't want to participate that's fine. Just wait till the next round of capital. It's more expensive for you, but this is what's already agreed upon, and this is what we're doing. And more often than not, people are like, cool, that makes sense. And they would want to follow on and participate that way. So it's really just creating enough momentum, whether it's from product, whether it's on team, it's a little bit of storytelling, but the best way to do that is bring people on that journey with you. And that's really what made it a lot easier.
That's awesome. And, how long did that process take? Are we talking 3-4 months?
So the entire process really took maybe about 9 months until we officially opened the round. Yep. And then we closed it like 3 months afterwards. So almost an entire year of planning to raise money, right? And it's the I forget exactly how the quote goes, but essentially it's the worst time to start preparing for the marathon is during the marathon, right? And so for me, that's kind of what it was like. It's like, okay, well, what can I do to be as prepared as possible? Because I knew that, I'm fundraising in the Boston area. And the second that word gets out that we're fundraising and people start saying no, then there's eventually going to be this effect of I spoke to everyone said no, right? So if I can get enough of those, how do I turn those no's into yeses? Then sweet, we'll go do that, right? And then once we had that, I'm interested if you can do these core things, perfect. Took a note of that. Hey, we spoke last month. You said if we did these core 3 things, you'd be interested in learning more. We've done these core 3 things and more. And in addition, we have other interest from investors. And, you almost kind of create this message of so I didn't even want to fundraise, but there are so many people throwing money at us. We just decided to take it,
And I can assure all our viewers out there, aspiring entrepreneurs, that Derek is actually one of the hardest working entrepreneurs I've ever seen. I mean, you and I had a few email exchanges, I think at 5 a.m. some days. You were up in your apartment and working through things, and certainly haven't seen too many founders who've put in the hours that you have to get your business off the ground, to also learn about how to be an entrepreneur as well as fundraise. So, what was the reward like at the end of that, the day that you got all the checks in for that first safe note? You put in so much effort over the previous 12 to 24 months. You went through Mass Challenge, you did all these things. What was the feeling like that day you got funded?
Yeah. So I remember specifically the first check that hit our bank account. It was a $15,000 check that we had in our bank account. And I remember I was sitting at my desk at Mass Challenge, and I checked the bank account, and it was there, and I literally cried. It was just this whole idea of you internalize something for so long, and then it's an outward expression of people joining that journey with you.
Yes.
And I think that's really the secret of being a good CEO, a good entrepreneur, is the ability to be able to cast a vision in a way that people can be a part of that journey and say, hey, I'm going to raise my hand. I can help do this. And that was the best feeling. And even today, as we continue to get checks, it's like, hey, it's great when people volunteer their time, but when people can believe in you with their dollars, it carries a whole nother weight. And so one of the things that's been very important for me is all of our advisors and board members are also investors in the business. And it just, there's a different level of skin in the game. And I personally, I put some money in the early days, and it's just hey, I'm literally giving my all, my time, my body, my attention. And of course I'm trying to do things I'm back into my 6 a.m. gym routine.
Good.
To keep myself healthy, because the reality is if I'm not healthy, then my business won't be healthy, and then my team won't be healthy. And then it's a spiraling thing. So it's even today, I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So I remember when I first started thinking about entrepreneurship, and I would look at some of these companies, and there were a few programs that they would get accepted to, and they would do these things and be featured in these places like Forbes and others. And I'd say, man, if I could just intern for a company like that would be that'd be incredible. I don't have to get paid.
Yeah.
I never really fathomed like I would be the CEO of a company that's going through that process and raising funding and being featured in all these incredible places. So it's sometimes I wish I could go back in time and just tell my freshman year of college self, like, hey man, like it's gonna work out. Just be patient, right? And I think that's really my encouragement to these listeners is, it often takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
Right.
And it comes down to consistency and just doing what you love.
Right. It's phenomenal that you're sharing your story with us. I think you're so many aspiring entrepreneurs out there are going to be able to relate to your story, and you're going to be inspiring for them to, be patient, follow their process. In the end, you'll find the right people to go on the journey with. Every no you get is just getting you closer to the right yes. I think those are all phenomenal and inspirational words of wisdom from your journey. Is there anything that you said you just raised a second round? Was there anything that you learned in that round that you might want to share with people before we finish?
Yeah, so this round was a little bit different. It was the structure of the round was the same. So we did safes for both rounds. The biggest difference was for this round, we actually have some institutional money that participated, which is great, but also a little intimidating because when you get money from angels, a lot of times it's just straight up like, hey, like, yeah, do you have are you incorporated? Yes, cool. I like your idea. There's a check, right? Like that was kind of it. These institutions, I mean, there's a whole due diligence process and financial review and a lot of things that fortunately I had the right people around me who said, hey, Derek, before you get to this point, make sure your business is in order, right? And so that made the process a little bit easier for myself as we're going through and say, hey, we already have, like a data room with our cap tables and all this stuff in it. But I would say if anyone is thinking about raising a larger round of capital and going to, venture or stage funds, seed funds, whatever that may be, is make sure your house is in order.
Yes.
That's probably the number one advice I can meet. It's just make sure you have the right team, make sure you have the right, legal structure, make sure you understand exactly what you're giving up for your ask, make sure they're the right people, because once you get in bed, it's like they're there forever, right? So it's being very intentional. And I'm really proud of the investors that we have. And, there's some stuff that I can't share yet publicly. So in the coming weeks, these things will be announced, but it's been really great finding people that align with my vision, my culture, and it bleeds directly into our team members of, who I work with every single day. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of is I was talking to my team about this yesterday. It's like, hey, look, I'm full of energy. We all know that. But I was like, I don't want to be the person that is only carrying the torch. And I said, I want to make sure that all of our team members feel that enthusiasm and passion for the work that we're doing, the people that we're helping, the products that we're building. And I'm like, hey, if you want to talk to an investor, like just reach out to them. And this level of transparency and just communication, it's been really cool. It's been really cool to have that and see how our team members really feel not just Derek's business, but like, hey, like we're all building this together. Because really it's my team that makes me look good.
Well, you're an inspiring leader. I'm sure your team is proud to be part of Paerpay. I for one can't wait to see how successful you can be and how you're going to be able to help all these all your customers out there, and I'm looking forward to the rest of your journey and following that journey. So, but I do have one final question to ask you before we finish, and that's, how would you describe yourself in one word?
Whew. So one of my coaches told me, he gave me this analogy of what it was. He said, Derek, you're a wind-up toy. And I was like, I don't know if that's a compliment. Should I be offended by that? Like, what does that mean? He's like, let me explain. He was like, these little like toy, cars or little like characters that walk, and you wind them up, you crank them up, you put them down, and they go. They'll bump into a wall, they just redirect, and they keep going. They might fall over or stumble, but you can pick them back up, they keep going. And he's like, Derek, he's like, it seems like no matter what obstacles in your way, you bounce off the wall, you adjust, and you just keep going.
That's awesome.
And I think that's some encouragement also give to those listeners is that's kind of like I joke and say the secret of entrepreneurship is just don't die. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, look, it's not that I've had the perfect idea, or I had the best product, or I had the perfect team day one, or I had all the experience day one. It was just, I made a decision that I'm going to go and solve this problem, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to get better at it. And I made that commitment that every single day I'm going to get better. And it's my story. I mean, I didn't go to the most high end school. I don't know how to code. I'm self-taught in graphic design. I do book reading. I listen to podcasts. I'm just committed to growth and learning. And so it's not like I had the perfect formula day one. And so I think that's kind of the cool thing about my story is I'm kind of the unlikely founder, but I just been committed to the process, and it's worked out.
That's awesome. Well, you've provided some tremendous advice and best practices here for our listeners. I really appreciate it. You're an amazing person, and I just wish you nothing but the best success going forward. Don't crash into too many more walls, but I do know you will get back up when you do. So congratulations on all your success, Derek, and thanks for being on the Fundable Founders today.
Thank you.
To innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.